I'm Mara Menzies.
And I'm John Mukeni Namai.
We are both storytellers from Kenya.
Together with a meteorologist, we travel to the climate front lines of northern Kenya to discover how people there are using indigenous knowledge to adapt to climate change. This podcast, Listening to the Rainmakers, shares what we learned on our journey. Episode 5, God has moved farther away. So the traditional and the new forces in Turkana culture are trying to work together to help people adapt to the strains of climate change. In South Sudan, the Rainmakers and their traditional knowledge are still powerful. But in northern Kenya, rapid urbanization risks undermining them. Cultural change is moving at high speed.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I've actually been sharing with people here is the sense of style that you find up there, because it kind of struck me a little bit like sometimes it reminded me, particularly when we were places that we were in, Lodwar and Logichogi, like way up north. It was quite Mad Max-like. So you have the women with their beautiful beads and their shukas. And sometimes those beads are so high that the women cannot bend their necks. They're just, you would have to bend your body to look down. So they're still very beautiful in the traditional way. And then you have this, when you're looking at the young guys are the ones that you see around the towns. And they have the traditional hats, a lot of them with these exotic ostrich feathers, because you don't get the ostriches up there. They have their bead earrings and their metal earrings. They've got their shukas and their shoes made out of tires, and then a shirt. And then they've got these amazing sunglasses and kind of weird and wonderful hairstyles, the dreadlocks, and all of this. So I guess for the young people also, there's that the kind of experimentation of style that you get with young people wherever you are. But, they're all riding motorcycles. So sometimes there was a sense of this Mad Max-like feel about the place. So I think, they're also changing or kind of considering, what does modern mean to them, because they are taking things from from the past and things that look cool and feel cool and are part of their own culture. But at the same time, there is an understanding of, there is actually something else as well. And what does this look like? Because, a lot of people, there's smartphones, like even here, I didn't see it so much there, but I mean, if I compare it to like how things are here in Kilifi and on the South Coast, somebody has got a smartphone. And if there's a smartphone, someone's going to be looking at YouTube and all of this, there's outside influence that is constantly streaming in as well. So if you live in a town, it's impossible to be immune from it. And so they're kind of creating their own sense of what it means to be a young person in northern Kenya currently. So I found that really interesting. It felt a little bit more sort of the young men were doing that, whereas the young women felt it still a little bit more traditional. I remember when we went to Lokiriama and we were interviewing the women, they showed up with these amazing necklaces with the traditional shukas, and then they all had weaves, like the Nairobi style of, some purple hair, some pink hair. So, I mean, certainly like modern influence is continuously, entering the, even just the more indigenous cultures as well. And that's unavoidable. So, yeah, I think, it's like when it comes to sort of the generations and how that's kind of shifting and moving, it would be, I don't think it's right to kind of want to, there's this image of, what authentic people should be like. But, you can't do that. If you give any woman in the world the chance of washing clothes with their hands or using a washing machine, 100% would choose a washing machine. So, it's this kind of navigation of, how is technology changing things? And, the young people embrace technology much quicker than the old people, so I think it's an interesting time. And I think, if we were to go back in 20 years, it'll be completely and utterly different. It will be, I feel that it would be completely, because I think time kind of changes things. And I think we're now moving at a much faster rate of progression, or I don't want to say progression in the sense of like it's moving in a good way necessarily, but we're just moving.
The distance between the people and God has changed. It seems the God of yesterday was nearer to them, and they will get some things right most of the time. Like I said, okay, fine, if you have powers to bring rainfall, as some of you claim to, Is it possible now to appease your God and make sure that this drought is really is mitigated? Then they say, no, I think the God of today has moved far distance. And there is also issue of because they are trying to, because it's like there is a continuous drought that is happening as compared to yesteryears, and they believe that maybe God has moved away. Even if they appease him, he might not bring rain.
So obviously we all know that climate change has affected this region and has done for quite some time. How has that impacted the sector that you're working in?
Yes, I think that's affected us much. And as NDMA, we also have a component of climate change adaptation. We have a role in that. And for the many years I've worked with this organization, I have seen climate change affecting us directly. One is the frequency of droughts. In 2013, when I started working with NDMA, droughts used to appear like in 4 years you get one, but nowadays like you hardly get to 3 years before another drought cycle sets in. So we have seen increase in terms of drought episodes happening. Like currently we are facing the worst drought in 40 years. Now.
And just to add very quickly also, like when we were in Turkana, when we were driving through, going to meet the chiefs for the very first time, like just in the landscape, there were fossilized trees, which indicates that, at some point, long time ago, it was very heavily forested. And then even just the stories, like we didn't see very much livestock, wildlife. There were no, it's not like you're going and finding elephants and things there. So actually, even when the woman was telling the story about the monkey, also we hadn't seen any monkeys. So whether monkeys are a common part of the wildlife, it's perhaps long ago there were more wildlife because there were more trees. And so certainly, when you're listening to these folk tales, like folk tales exist based on what you see around you. You won't really get a tiger story in Kenya because we don't have tigers, but you kind of make these folk tales exist based on what we have and we see around us. So it's kind of really interesting in terms of the choice of stories that people have. There are stories a lot about bulls and about rocks because there's cows and rocks absolutely everywhere. So yeah, it's just kind of interesting to kind of observe that also.
Ama kwa kimila yenu mtu mkubwa anaanza mgeni?
Hapana. Hiyo kimila siku hizi hatuna.
Sawa.
I meant for fixing the microphone. Just if they're not comfortable with the guy.
Mama, tunaomba huyu amesema yake. Sijui kama pia una maoni ingine, maybe iko tuna yenye tofauti na yeye.
Bala.
It's not just their way of life in terms of the cattle and climate change that's changing. Everything is changing. The entire system of Turkana life is being lost. And there was a real sadness within that. It was also really interesting to hear one of them talk about the glass box. And the glass box was his interpretation of how science, the meteorology, the scientific aspect of that, and how that does sometimes inform the coming of the rains or prediction of weather. And recognize that actually there is some value in this glass box, which was really interesting because he was also the same Mzee who talked about how he felt that the Turkana were being cursed, that really they felt that God had really moved away from them. And the interesting thing about gods is that, with societies, if God is not serving us, then he's no longer relevant, and therefore you move to another god, a god that does serve you. So I suppose it was it just made me wonder about, there is the possibility for science to have increasing value amongst the elders and amongst the tradition in the traditional way of life. But yeah, what also struck me is that when he was talking about the Turkana were cursed, it's a dangerous place to be also, because if an entire community is cursed, then there's no hope. There's no hope. And I remember listening to Shonali Kumber's story about 7 generations of no hope. But then there is going to be somebody who comes and shakes things up and changes things and does bring hope. And there isn't that kind of story in the Turkana mythology or the Turkana folk tales. That doesn't exist. So perhaps a new narrative is needed, because if they don't adapt, then their way of life will end. And if they can't change the climate, they can't change climate change. There's no power there. And so therefore, I suppose they do have to come up with something different, something that is going to be able to sustain them and find a different rhythm to the one that they are accustomed to. So it's how do new stories and how do the creation of new stories fit into this? In what way, and who creates them, and how can they be disseminated across the entire community? How can they be shared with the different villages across, in order to provide a united story that shares the hopes and the dreams and the possibilities for the Turkana?
In the next episode, we hear how the borders drawn by former colonial powers are making these difficulties harder to resolve. We ask, as communities come under sometimes unbearable strain, how can they keep practicing their way of life?
Thanks to our project partners, Adverse Camber and ICPAC, and the project funders, the British Council.